Hi, everybody. Welcome on board. So we're going to start now the webinar. I'll start with a few kind of housekeeping items, and that way we'll let more people join. Meanwhile, I'm very happy to have you all here. I'm especially happy to have both Allison and Allastair from Definitive Healthcare. Hi, you guys.
Hey.
And they're going to talk about the collaboration, the amazing collaboration I think they have between marketing, customer success, and the whole customer experience. They represent kind of two sides of the house. So I think it would be great. So housekeeping notes, first of all, you can ask us questions. We have Q&A, ping them through, and we'll have special stops for those, for all of you who want to ask questions. Also, we'll have one poll in the middle with a small token of appreciation to those who fill it. And lastly, if there's anything else that isn't in the questions or we don't have time, you could always shoot us an email at the end with your questions and we can send you responses later on. We'll also be recording this, of course, so we'll be sharing the recording later. And I think with that, let's start the discussion. So again, welcome on board, everybody. Great to have you. Our topic is, the collaboration between marketing, customer success, and customer experience. Just kind of talking about the elephant in the room. There's two elephants in the room today, special offer. First of all, my nose. So I have this beautiful, sexy look because I have a big scratch, so ignore it, right? That's the one elephant off the table. The other elephant is a bit bigger than that, and that's Corona and COVID-19, and how does that impact our customer engagement? So just as a very high level note on that, the way we see it, the way our customers see it, marketing, customer success should keep on reaching out to customers, keep on engaging customers. Your customers want to hear from you now more than ever because they're anyway at home, because they're anyways trying to keep on with their work and being, looking for those professional engagements because they don't have them face-to-face anymore. So why not have them like this on Zoom? I think most vendors are slowly getting back to it. Of course, they still have targets, they still have actions that they have to do, jobs to be done. And that's why we find that many companies going with sensitivity to their customers, but keeping engaging, keeping the work going, actually see great responses from their customers. And you shouldn't shy away because the crisis is out. Of course, if you're an industry that is super hit, like, I don't know, hotels, restaurants, you have to be considerate of that. Before we dive in, so just a word about Crowdvocate. Crowdvocate is a customer advocacy platform, but we mainly focus also on building the community with these events, with bringing in experts and having a lot of thought leadership and sharing ideas. And you're always welcome to push to us ideas of things you want to talk, whether you want to bring those topics yourselves or you want us to focus on with other speakers. So that's a bit about us. Not going too much. We have a Slack community that we can help you join to, and we can always share thoughts about advocacy. The way we look at it basically is that we want to help companies find their advocates, whether these are internal advocates to those companies or external to their industry, activate those advocates to whatever you want to have them do, and then measure that. And that's how you create customer-led growth. That's our passion, that's our belief, and that's why we're sharing a lot of that. Now, while I go through the next slide, I'll just share the poll and we'll move on to Allison and Allastair. So just so you know, I'm running now the poll. Feel free to answer. Maybe some of you have answered in the past, but we're always happy to have you. And whoever answers can get this book of Phonocracy. We'll send it over to you guys. So if you answer it completely, you'll get a book. So last piece from my side, just to say that customers have a journey. This is where customer success and customer marketing actually meet. Think about it. Post-sale, somebody on boards, who's in charge? Customer success or customer marketing? I believe Allastair and Allison will talk about that. You finish onboarding, you move to adoption, you move to advocacy, right? Then comes retention, whatnot, upsell, expansion. all of those things happen as part of a user's journey, and they always have this dual interface because sometimes he's in your website, sometimes the user is in your product, sometimes maybe in a community, sometimes in a user forum, training portal. Who owns that journey? How do you make sure that that journey is seamless between the internal departments of your company? Because the customer doesn't care about the internal departments. They want to make sure that your product works and the service works. And that's, I think, what we're going to talk about. How does this collaboration between the department works across that life cycle, across that post-sale journey? And with that, I will hand the wand to you guys, which means that I need to stop sharing, right?
Yep. Yep.
There we go.
All right.
And again, just before they start, feel free to ask questions within the Q&A, and we're on.
Right. So thank you, Gal. Appreciate the opportunity. This has been a good thing for Allison and I to kind of pull together as we've been working on this since the end of last year. So Allison, myself, work very closely together. We like to affectionately tell our executive management team that we are attached at the hip. We have found that this actually gets us out of trouble more often than not. So if you don't have either somebody in customer experience or customer marketing to attach yourself to, I highly recommend it. So just a little bit about Definitive. For those of you who may not know who we are a sales and marketing analytics platform for companies that sell into healthcare. So we have a database that makes up about 2 million profiles on all different firm types across the healthcare continuum. Within that, we have about 9 billion or so Medicare and commercial claims. And we have 9 out of the top 10, both medical and pharmaceutical companies. The third bullet is tech companies. So anybody and everybody that sells into healthcare really comes in to utilize our data. We definitely have seen from a customer standpoint during COVID that they're still very active. My support team is still getting a lot of calls. And so we're continuing to see activity, but we'll talk more about COVID later on. Oops, wrong way. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Allastair Meffen. I'm the Associate Vice President of Customer Experience at Definitive. I've been in the customer success experience space for about 10 years now. And I head up the teams that make up customer experience, support, training, all of our CSMs. Yeah, we have an integrations team. And then most importantly, if you don't have one, an operations team to help manage all of that activity.
Excellent. I'm Allison Snow. Thanks everyone so much for coming. I live very close to the airport, so you may be hearing a train or a plane, and there's not too much I can do about that. So sorry, I also don't control the timing, so anything could happen. I'm the VP of Go-to-Customer Marketing, which means I'm responsible for many aspects of prospecting customer marketing, including programs. I won't repeat my bio, but I've been in marketing for about 15 years. And outside of taking about 4 years off from the practitioner role to do some analyst and consulting work with Forrester. So I certainly didn't invent marketing. I won't tell you a ton about what I do. I work toward KPIs for high priority revenue relevant outcomes like customer acquisition, customer engagement, referral, cross-sell, upsell, renewals, advocacy, all words that you guys know really well. I consider myself responsible for helping buyers buy. And I think that's really key to the relationship I have with Allastair. So it means kind of creating really welcome experiences for prospects, like content that reflects their buyer's journey, whether they're just becoming aware, whether they're conducting an anonymous search, or whether they're asking for pricing and demos, or really, frankly, doing my best to build brand preferences for individuals that don't have a purchase in sight. That's part of what we do here. And on the client side, there's really three things that are super important to us both. One, helping Definitive be a good strategic partner to clients. Two, helping clients get very, very deep value from the investments that they've made with us. And three, really thinking about how we can create a vision for clients with for a deeper commercial relationship with Definitive. So there's your upsell and cross-sell components. I think I'd like to just say something that's already been said, which is we started working together at the end of last year. Thank you, Allastair, for mentioning that. So I arrived in Q4 of 2009. It means it's probably fair to say that we don't have all the answers. You won't find all the answers in this presentation. What you will find is we've got lots of shared ambitions and I think a great approach to collaborative relationship. I hope it sparks some dialogue. I think we hear a whole lot about the importance of alignment between marketing and sales for all you marketers out there. And I hope I can convince you today, and Allastair can convince you today, that this is really the next organization, the next frontier of organizational alignment.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. Thank you, Allison. So just want to talk to you about our agenda. We're going to talk about why we are working together, how that collaboration really has come together. We'll talk about some operational initiatives that we've put in place, strategic initiatives as well, and then what is our stack and what tools do we utilize to really make sure that that happens. So first off, Allison's going to talk about our life cycle.
Awesome. Would you mind building this out, Allastair? I think it takes 3 more clicks, and I'm sorry for that. Just obsessed with the flash animation. I was trying to use it. So there's a lot to absorb in this slide, but I think the center of our partnership is our fundamental agreement that the customer life cycle doesn't equal your sales cycle, or of course ours. Not to repeat what Gal has already kind of walked you through here, but most of us on the call are really well versed in terms like inquiry, SQL, opportunity stage 1, and all of that. And they're very important to us, but they're important to us only because they help us calibrate to what is in fact the client experience. So there's no B2B buyer who ever wondered, not you, not me, not any one of our clients, who ever wondered what score they had in your system or whether you considered them in opportunity stage 2. It's just never happened. And they don't cross any chasm or go over any kind of wall at any point if they move from being buyers to being clients. If they had a great experience in the discovery phase, then that experience is not forgotten or overlooked as they use and engage with your product. It's very likely that delighted customers were once delighted prospects. So we think about that a whole lot. I know that when we think about the life cycle, if we think about Allastair being on that left side and me being on the right, not that it's our teams and entire organization, but for the sake of discussion, Allastair certainly does not want to adopt customers that experienced frustration or unpleasantness as they conducted their buying journey, because that's an uphill battle for him and a problem for him to solve. And I don't want to have to influence or persuade buyers to ultimately engage in a free trial or a demo if I don't have the voices of happy customers helping me tell the story that this journey is worth taking. So just to dive into this model a little more, and this is a Forrester image. We're allowed to use it as long as we credit it, which I did. But the simple kind of graphic here, we can zoom into this and think about examining the places that we really like in the cycle, right? The places where we make money. And that looks like a closed sale, additional opportunities from customers like retention and referral, and of course upsell, which might mean more users or more departments or more product. And then we examine some of the portions that enable that. And a lot of that really just looks like engagement. You'll see here, we sort of separated product engagement. So what's important to us both is that folks are using the product, not only that they're logging in, but they're using advanced and powerful features that become linchpins of a client's workday. And of course, with marketing, we really want to be providing sources of value above and beyond the product. Best practices, connecting customers to one another, content that makes sense for them in their given timeline. But all of it means that what's important to us today is that buyers trust existing customers and seek their guidance. So as much as we think about the post-sale marketing piece versus the pre-sale marketing piece, it's still just completely dependent on the customer experience. So as someone who wants to influence people on that right side and the left side to engage with us further, I am really, frankly, as a customer marketer and a prospect marketer, fairly dependent on Allastair's team to be extraordinary at what they do.
All right, and so we're gonna stop there for a sec to see if there's any Q&A from any questions.
I think not at this point. I would just have one thing that I want to add. So Allison, just to clarify, you look at the customer journey from the moment they're a prospect. So not just post-sale, not just once they become a customer, but actually this very long life cycle of first interest prospect, then becoming customer, then moving into, advocacy, whatnot.
We do, because we feel pretty strongly that the customer views it that way.
Cool. Okay, I think we can move on for now.
Yeah, and it's certainly been helpful for my team as well to have Allison as part of that journey, so that we're not just fixing everything post sale. we can help upstream as well, which is always a help. So we wanted to first go and talk about how we've sort of thought about our relationship. And there's a lot of information on this slide, so we're not gonna go into all of it, but it's understanding, what are the company's success factors that Allison and I are responsible for, and really looking for what the executive team is really looking for us to help with and achieve from the company. And we wanted to think about it not only from the customer's experience, but from a customer experience, but also from the marketing side, and sort of who owns which pieces as you make your way through each of these success factors. Allison mentioned earlier cultivating those advocates and those customers who love the product. That ultimately falls to the customer experience team is responsible for making sure that their onboarding is amazing, that we're really on top of any dissatisfaction that may come up along the way. And then making sure using NPS or using CSAT to gather that data and start to really create a pool of happy customers that we can pass along to Allison. We then want to start looking, into, how do we really drive our renewal rates? This, as many of you on the call, I'm sure, are working through, is how do we reduce churn in a time of COVID? And we'll talk about a strategic initiative that we've actually put in place to help mitigate that. But this is really the ultimate number for my team and for the company as a whole, because we have made that switch from new business generating the majority of our business to now really post-sale being the bigger revenue generator for the company. And so we have to continuously monitor that, make sure that we understand what levers the team can pull to continually increase that renewal rate, or at least keep it flat right now in this current time. We also do a lot of looking for leads. The customer experience team does not own the quota. We have an account executive team who's responsible for all of the business side of our client sales, but 50% of the dollars that get closed on the upsell business, it comes directly out of leads from customer experience. So it's really important that we help that team generate those, and working with Allison. She's providing us that information in order to make that possible. We also take any insight that we get from our clients that we think would benefit not just one or two, but a majority, and pass those along to Allison so that her team can then generate that content. We also want to make sure that we're making a customer feel like they're the most important customer in the world. We all know that we've segmented our customer bases. We've all have the top of the triangle, our highest touch customers, and they're absolutely getting the most attention because they're generating the most revenue for the company. That's normal. But as you make your way down that pyramid, you really want to make sure that even in that third and fourth tier, that those customers feel like they are at the top of the pyramid. And so making sure that we have the right tools and the right content in order to do that is hugely important. And then kind of the last piece from the team is building out this voice of the customer. I talked about NPS and CSAT survey. We do that already. You know, we are trying to think about which customers would be the best for our thought leadership, bringing them in for webinars. We also helping to think internally at folks who might benefit, who our customers would benefit hearing from. We have a COVID series going right now where it's purely internal folks who are speaking to our customers, and that's been a huge success. The last thing that the customer experience team is working through is really talking to the customers and making sure that they're comfortable doing advocacy. Some of your best and brightest customers, frankly, just don't want to be in the limelight. So we have to make the ask, and we have to know when to do it appropriately. And so we work very closely with our senior CSMs and CSMs to make sure that we're bringing in the right folks that can then move over into Allison's team.
Perfect. Totally agree. I think it's useful to think about the concept of individual and sort of on the spectrum of individual to at scale. So I think a good example to pull out here is, in the retention category, renewal category, Allastair's team is far closer to the customer, talking to individuals every single day. They're really able to collect trends and patterns when it comes to, what's a challenge for a customer in onboarding. More specifically, what's a challenge for a customer on onboarding from a med device vertical. For people without a background in analytics, whatever have you. And with those insights, I'm really able to, at more scale, build a cohort-based corrective action. I think that's the best example we could derive here as far as what the input is and kind of what the output is from my side. So really dependent on Allastair's team just keeping an ear to the ground and sort of developing the processes that we'll talk about next. So that information kind of gets to me in an organized and process-driven way.
Great. So the next thing we wanted to, talk to you about was, how have we operationalized this? And this is one method that we have put in place. You can see Allison and I meet every week, every Thursday from 1 to 2. We go through our list and make sure that, if there are 5, initiatives that we have going, that we are completely aligned. I'm hearing things from other meetings that I'm in, and so is Allison's, and we're just making sure that we are keeping each other informed as well. We've been talking about a digital marketing strategy or a low touch customer strategy for a little while now. And you've got different pockets of the company talking about it. And Allison's in some of those meetings, I'm in some of those meetings. And it doesn't mean that we're always getting the same information. So it's really important that you have that close tie. Maybe it doesn't need to be weekly, but for us right now in this environment, it does. We also meet, we have a commercial meeting with all of our executive team every month. And Allison and I make sure that we talk before the meeting As she said here, no surprises, really important. Neither one of us wants to have that weird face on the Zoom meeting where we're like, oh, really should have known about that. And then afterwards, making sure that we debrief, right? Because we are so closely tied, you know, we're both listening during the whole meeting and taking notes, but we want to make sure as we come out of it that we're like, okay, these are the 5 initiatives that I heard. What did you hear? And can we then put action plans in place to try and move the ball forward, even just a little bit over the next month, so that when we come back for that next monthly, we can show progress for both of us. You know, big things, product launches, and, you know, mappings and messaging, all of that is absolutely imperative that you are working together. If we go to launch a product and the CSMs haven't been trained on the messaging that Allison's team has put together, and we start going down a rabbit hole that we may not come out of. The other piece is making sure that all of our digital areas are up to date. So thinking about the help center or the login pages, for example, you know, we have to make sure that we're all on the same page when it comes to that. Just some questions that, you know, you should really be thinking about. You know, are you aware of each other's metrics? Do you know how each of you are gold? Right? We know how each of us are being represented, and what's going to show up in an executive meeting for our goals every time. And so in our prep meeting, hey, we're down this month on this, you're up on this. Let's make sure that we know about it. We also want to make sure that we know about we foresee any problems or friction. Talking about common customer issues. All of these questions will absolutely bring the two of you into alignment, and the two teams into alignment, and then allow for you to have productive meetings and really come to the table prepared as you go through each of those. So now Allison's going to talk a little bit about what we've been doing.
Sure. No pressure to read the slide. You won't know what most of this means. The point here is, now that we've operationalized planning, what are we really trying to accomplish together? So this is Q1 of this year, and Q2 is a second slide. I'll foreshadow to you that Q2 changed quite a bit, necessary pivot due to COVID-19. I'm sure you all can relate. So that being said, this is what Q1 looked like from a planned initiative perspective. So again, won't read you this list, but for the purpose of today's webinar, I've highlighted all of the sort of initiatives that the team was leading that I needed more than medium heavy engagement from Allastair's team, right? So you can see theme-wise, we're working very closely together on all advocacy related issues, all renewal related items, which is expected, but it doesn't stop there. So I think a good example of things that might not be as obvious to the eye is an ABM program. We might launch an ABM program, but we shouldn't do that without chatting with Allastair's team, right? So if we're going to think about selecting target accounts, we not only need to understand a little bit more deeply than what we can sort of generate in a Salesforce report, for instance, but we also want them to kind of say, yes, and I know, have some context in the organization. We can really do something personalized and customized for that account, of course, the way that ABM should be. So we want to learn about those accounts there. And for Q2, just wanted to take a few, I know here I am again with my builds, wanted to take a few examples of what we set out to do together. So Q2 has been extraordinary, but this slide has a few of our goals, and this is just a few selected examples to illustrate that collaboration. So we set out to reinvigorate contacts and accounts. This is really important to us both, and I hope this doesn't sound repetitive, but clearly engaged clients are more likely to renew, right? Easy logical math there. And additionally, we need people to absorb, to welcome and absorb definitive messaging, and we can only do that to an engaged client base. So we have to every now and then kind of take a look at what we're doing and what might be getting stale. In this case, we brainstormed a little bit to look at the customer newsletter, which is something we've been sending since Q4 in a similar package design, etc. And we expected that maybe some folks were experiencing fatigue. So we tested some other formats in place of a weekly newsletter, and we were very pleased with the results. So we've got really strong click-through rates here. I would caution, this is a bit of a, it's true, but this was backed by COVID content, and you'll see further in this presentation as we progress that our perspective and input into the COVID conversation is very, very strong. I'll skip the benchmark call to action, but essentially we also wanted to reinvigorate folks by doing some benchmark based, hey, what are your peers and competitors doing in your vertical? So that was good too, another kind of brainstorm that we had. Another initiative is the hard bounce closed loop process. So essentially here, we wanted to enable account owners and customer success managers to take an action when a contact left a company. And this was, I don't say low-hanging fruit, but we have automation to deal with this from a system perspective. So we can perhaps, update Salesforce that they're no longer a user, but nothing really that created an alert for stakeholders on the account side, or any way for someone on the sales side to follow up with that contact if it was appropriate, right? So former user, really good opportunity there for a potential sales call with the new company. So this was super collaborative. When a user departs, it impacts also metrics in the product. So if we've got a certain account and they're expected to be, they're contracted for 10 users and we're seeing 8 users use, there's a ratio there that as it becomes exponentially worse looking as you consider the number of accounts with departed users that we haven't gone after and made sure that they're, 10 out of 10 in that particular case. So just kind of helpful all around, and that was a good, example of an operational initiative that we teamed up on. And finally, NPS workflow. So Allastair and his team monitor NPS scores on a very consistent basis, and we plan to connect those results to appropriate actions. So corrective action for detractors and specific requests from self-identified promoters. When I look at this slide, I think to myself that between these and other programs, we really were set up for a very well-planned Q2, but then we weren't.
So we're going to pause there for a second to see if there's any questions.
So yeah, first of all, I encourage people to ask on questions, but I'll start with a quick question on this. So it seems like you're picturing a very pink picture that everything works great. And you guys have a good collaboration. You sync before these weekly meetings. I would love to hear how many other people actually have these weekly meetings between customer success and marketing. So everybody's welcome to raise their hands, like if they're doing weekly meetings between customer success and marketing, just out of curiosity. But where are the challenges? I mean, unless you have a slide designated to that kind of, because you're so many processes from NPS to customer onboarding. You mentioned a lot of different initiatives and topics, and it's amazing, but I'm sure that, there are teams and there are sometimes somebody drops a stick. Where do you find it to be more, the hardships to arise, if you will? Like, where do you find things that you still think that, are complex for the organization to understand how you should streamline them?
Yeah, so I think from my perspective, the biggest challenge that we have is that while the company and our revenue have moved forward with really being, post-sale being the most important piece, we're still really focused on new business as a marketing and staying on that piece. And not that it's not important, because I think all of us want to be building our new business funnel and really pushing new logos. But as a company, you start to see that shift to the client sales really taking up the bulk of the revenue, you want to start to see the company's whole outlook start to shift. And we're seeing that, but I think that's probably right now our biggest challenge. is there's still a lot of focus on the pre-sale, new business, new logo, and we really need to start shifting that to post-sale, and that's not just a marketing and customer experience challenge. I think that's just a company challenge that we work through, but it really affects Allison and I quite a bit.
I think it's a cross-industry and cross-SaaS challenge. Many companies still don't understand that SaaS is recurring revenue. But how does it impact your day-to-day? Or I mean, in what way does that kind of management spotlight on demand gen, if you will, impact your work, your collaboration, especially in customer success and that?
Yeah, so I think it gets back to just the content, right? It's what is the type of content that is expected to be generated, and what kind of advocacy does the customer experience team need to generate? We are right now, we do a lot of references, and we do we're trying to think through the customer buying story, but there's not a lot of true customer, user groups. We're starting to move towards that, or cabs, but those would be the two biggest, user groups in executive advisory board would be huge for post-sale, right? That's a huge help for customer experience, and something that Allison and I are collaborating on right now. But it's taken us, 6 months, 8 months of really bringing this up again and again and again to make it a priority.
I think
Okay.
I think it's a
we have a
great
question from, sorry, we have a question from
Sure.
Kyra. I hope I pronounced it correctly. It's to Allison, actually. So how has the input or feedback from customer experience team driven your new business and customer segmentation strategy? Like, how has their feedback impacted your strategy?
Sure. I think we've become, since Q4, increasingly verticalized. So it's one next layer of segmentation than we sort of did as carefully than we did before. So for instance, the newsletter strategy, the content development strategy, we try to look through the lens of, is this an appropriate piece of content, an actionable piece of content for a med device vertical versus something in pharma or biotech. And I think that helps. I've been told by Allastair and his team that does help a lot of the conversations that they have. They're vertically focused as well. So they are, looped into those newsletters and just overall messaging that happens to those verticals. So their input is, this leads to better and more substantial conversations. So essentially what that does for me, and I think what Allastair really described there was, how much time can we dedicate? How do we balance the time we dedicate to prospect and customer? So when we think about the customer experience being impacted by verticals, we do extend that to the sales side as well, and think, if this helps a customer experience professional have a more substantial and informed conversation, certainly it would help the sales professional as well, who's also verticalized. It doesn't mean the same content can, fill both of those requirements, right? Someone in a initial portion of their buyer journey or in a demo versus someone who's worked with us for 5 years. But it is kind of one additional layer that we can think about to give strong, relevant, and personalized messaging, and sort of just stay in tune with the conversations that those folks are having.
Are you doing any kind of segmentation, though, based on that? Like different segmentation in the sense of the audience, perhaps?
By campaign, we are. So I think our first sort of go-to-customer strategy is defined by the vertical segmentation. But I think the go-to-audience strategy, if you will, for specific campaigns, we really do get to have fun in terms of cutting the audience and their interests. So within the pharma vertical, you've got folks who have had drugs on the market, drugs or therapies on the market for a very long time and are fairly mature, and others who have a totally different set of interests and set of requirements because they're sort of trying to get through a regulatory cycle, if you will. So if we're having a webinar that might talk pharma, we want to appeal to those folks to attend with sort of those separate messages and speak to those very separate needs so that it's very specific, again, personalized, customized. Respectful, I think, is really the right term for, you know, we know a little bit about these customers and there's these prospects, and we should show them that we know and we care and that we're thinking about those aspects of who they are and segmenting that way. So I would say that's a campaign by campaign basis, while our kind of macro segmentation strategy is vertical.
Okay, cool. Let's move on, and we'll have one more round of questions at the end.
So as Allison alluded to, enter our COVID-19. So for Definitive, that started our work from home in the early part of March. We were, it was about a week after we had all been sitting in the same room, getting ready for our biggest conference of the year, HIMSS, when we literally got the announcement while we were in the room that HIMSS had been officially canceled. It was sort of the first big piece for us to realize that this is happening. And I don't know about all of you, but for us, it was a fairly rushed to work from home experience. And Allison and I had to really think on our feet to figure out how do we continue to touch base with our customers and make them feel like they were getting what they needed, but not overwhelming them. And, you know, I'm sure like all of you, your inbox is continuously filled every day with emails about how you can do better in COVID and collaborate with COVID and everything COVID. And so we really had to make sure that our messaging was still getting through to our customers, and that we were coming up with innovative ideas to do that. We were very fortunate. We had a massive dashboard built by an internal team that really helped launch Definitive into the COVID conversation. And so that had a major impact on us. And so Allison's going to talk about a little bit about where we took that.
Absolutely, thanks, Allastair. So we had some well-laid plans, as I tried to demonstrate for you guys. We were in a really strong position to pivot, though, for the exact reason Allastair mentioned. So what he's describing is something we call the COVID-19 capacity predictor, and specifically a result of our data science and product teams collaborating using our proprietary data and some public data to essentially predict when resources like ICU beds and ventilators would max out in any given county. So we really did have people scrambling for this information. It's important information. We were extremely well positioned and uniquely positioned to put something like this together. So we were just kind of lucky to have that. So again, just capitalizing on really strong, informed, and trusted perspective and those very unique capabilities. So super fortunate. Our job became orchestration of channels and approaches to share this information as broadly as possible. And so here's a few things that we did with that kind of at the center, if you will. We wanted to cultivate relationships. We knew this was the right time to engage and have what I describe as non-transactional and frictionless interactions. Not so easy to ask your sales team to jump on the phone and get demos and ask for written checks right now. Folks are doing it. They're absolute heroes in that regard. But from our end, really had to give them reasons to engage clients and just keep that relationship active, keep that trust active. So when it's time to go back to the sales conversation, that conversation makes sense and feels organic. So in the spirit of respecting time, we've added 15-minute webinars to our portfolio of channels. And this has been extraordinary. I think it's a really nice way to indicate to our audience that we respect their time, that this is a different time than usual. And so, we did see some results there that were again, the content was very, very compelling. We had a record amount of registrants in 24 hours. Sales and accounts have given us feedback that they're able to cultivate relationships now and feel kind of good about that. They're able to have conversations where they can recognize that spend is difficult, and but we're still, again, as you mentioned, Gal, right at the beginning, engaging with people. Business goes on as usual. They still need to make decisions. We have data and analytics that can support that. So we did want to show our product as well. Our product happens to be really strong here, so we took the opportunity to both minimize webinars to 15 minutes, talk about what the analytics are telling us as far as predictions, and then kind of show the product in action. So very much went from a series of slides and audio to something more like this: video, slides, and also some work in the product. We saw also a surge in program-related sales opportunities, which is great, a fantastic outcome. And then a little bit away from the content, we thought we would take time to do two things: amplify the customer voice and just kind of work on our internal operations on the backside. So for amplifying the customer voice, we want a pipeline, right? When we first started kind of building customer panels, we had some work to do to kind of call folks and say, hey, do you want to be on a panel? Here's what the panel's about, hoping you have something great to say. And now we're just talking to customers far more frequently, soliciting input for topics and thinking about asking folks to consider a speaking opportunity and then kind of figuring it out from there, so we end up with a pipeline. So this looks great for us right now in terms of what I put in quotation marks, bench strength, right? So we've really got some folks ready to go to kind of speak, not necessarily on our behalf, but about information that really impacts everyone else. Everyone kind of wants to understand not only what's happening during COVID and how you're kind of managing through this time, but what's on the other side, what's really going to change permanently versus what's going to change kind of in the short term and the short term and the long term. And then finally, client advocacy operations. This is just work we have to do internally that we've done fairly well, and that Allastair's team was already kind of doing this, really just listening for opportunities for people to tell very compelling stories, right? Stories that kind of make up for that hit a real nerve, if you will. Stories where someone says, you know what, lots of our customers have told me they struggle with that, and you've really figured it out. We'd really like to tell this story to the rest of our customers. Are you using the product in a really interesting way? And this is something we want to shout from the rooftops. So we're just trying to build that discipline, if you will, into the rest of the organization to kind of listen for opportunities like that. People are generally really good about it. It just takes a little bit of training. And then maybe a little bit of, here are some really good things to say when you hear something like that to get folks to participate in something like this with us. So that's how we, just some examples of the pivot and things that we'll focus on while we're not going to do as aggressive an upsell strategy or a cross-sell strategy or a product launch in this time.
So then moving on, we talk about just one strategic initiative.
Excellent. So, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Allison.
I did mess up there. So basically the retention task force, I know we're looking at time here, probably one of the more important strategic initiatives at Definitive right now. Allastair is going to give us more details, but this has been a theme that I just kind of want to touch on as well, again, thematically relevant in this webinar, the concept of paying attention to post-sale. So Definitive is 9 years old, and it's put a lot of its engine behind new sales for most of its existence. And frankly, that has served the company really well. Our growth rates are phenomenal, no complaints here. It just simply serves us well now to build an engine to not only keep customers and protect revenue, right? A big part of what we want to do, but also be able to understand not only why customers buy from us, but why they stay with us and what factors lead to loyalty. It's not just that it costs, more money to acquire a customer than it does to keep one, but we've got responsibilities to customers that we both acknowledge. So we want to make sure we're innovating in the product, behaving as a strategic partner, connecting our clients to one another, being a source of best practices, and all of that. The simple act of sharing actionable data and insights from our data so folks can kind of use it and really get guidance from us at all times about how to use the product and how to succeed with the product and how to build it into programs and how to point the product against very high priority outcomes. And we know that when we embrace those responsibilities, things are good. And we know that signals of churn occur when we don't behave in ways that demonstrate that we take those responsibilities very seriously. So I have more to say on the slide, but I think for the sake of time, Allastair, maybe you can talk a little bit about the metrics.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this side because we are up against it. But, as you think about, as you look across the top, we think this is from really from the individual contributor through the fourth chevron, really to the board level, right? What metrics do they really care about? From the highest level. What are they? Why are they important? And then, how are we going to pull them in? So, we wanted to make sure that our red accounts were getting completely covered, that we had a way to override them. Definitely some red accounts are green. We wanted to look at, risk plan execution, making sure that we had, of all of the red accounts that should be covered, that they are. How are we going to improve the churn score? And then ultimately, right, everybody's going to be counted against the revenue and account retention. So we really, Alice and I had to work together because we now need to build the content. We had to think about first the plan, and now we got to collaborate together on what content do we need to build to put in the hands of the CSMs to really affect this program and really move the ball forward. And so this plan has been 8 months in the making. It went live at the end of April. So I would say over the next 3 months, if we come back, if you hear from us again, we'll be able to talk a little bit more about results, and hopefully they're positive.
I think the best thing about that initiative that Allastair described is it really is a customer insights project at scale. So the idea that it now becomes a content project makes so much sense. So we've learned a little bit about our customers, why they stay with us, and now we have to really put those insights into action and indicate that we understand and we hear and we're listening. Similar to that is the Client Experience and Advocacy Council. So this is essentially very much taking shape as we go. In essence, we formed a multifunctional team made up of internal teams that are frontline to customers and know all the grit and detail about customer struggles, customer wins, customer praises, just what's really working well and what could be improved. That looks like account managers and customer success managers, and then teams that can respond to those insights, like marketing and sales, sales enablement in particular, and of course, folks on the product side. So it's really just the right layer of the organization structure to generate ideas and drive action. It's about 15 people. We meet every 2 weeks. Not everyone comes every 2 weeks. It's informal for now. But we challenged ourselves, as this screen will tell you, just challenged ourselves to drive revenue against outcomes that we all care about, right? We all care about the company. Whether we're metric against them exactly is beside the point. Good for Definitive is good for us. Decrease clients' time to value, which we think is something we hold really dear as a goal. Again, this increases engagement. This makes customers happy. This helps me sell. This helps Allastair do his job. Just very virtuous cycle there. And finally, to name and own cross-functional initiatives that come out of it. So far, one of those initiatives was a more formal referral program. This has happened really, really well. Again, very fast-growing company, less process than you might envision, and not a ton of attention on building pipeline, just a lot of attention on getting references and referrals when you need them. So this is really something we're happy to be jumping into as an initiative. And again, have us back 3 months later, we might be able to talk results.
And so the last piece that we did want to just kind of share with everyone is what does our, really what does our technology stack look like today? Our platform is underlying to a lot of this. We do a lot of in-app messaging through the connection to Churn Zero. We leverage Zendesk for our help center. We're also, Allison and I have been talking about a community, building one of those out. Salesforce as our CRM and ultimately the source of truth for the company. And that all syncs up with Churn Zero, providing the health score and whatnot to the greater company. The CSMs really live in Churn Zero as their CS platform. And then we, of course, on the marketing, reaching out on the marketing side, we are utilizing HubSpot for both pre and post-sale marketing. So this is sort of how we all communicate with one another at the technology level.
Okay, and we have really like 2-3 minutes if anybody has additional questions. My question would be actually on the slide that you had on retention, the campaigns that you're running now. So the red campaign,
yes.
Preventing churn, like if you could share a bit more about the collaboration there, like how did you actually, for example, what was the part from, I assume that customer success was owning, you know, the understanding who's at risk, right? But then, I mean, where do you find the collaboration? Does marketing need to provide the messaging? I mean, do you leverage existing customers to actually help you maintain churning customers? What are some of the collaborations and tactics specifically about that? Because many companies are probably focused now on preventing churn.
Allison, I'll let you take that one.
Sure. Thank you so much. I think I'd say first, as we know that the channels that are available to us a bit more intimately. So when we think about how we might appeal to, say, contacts that are unengaged versus accounts that are unengaged, I think before we started collaborating, it wasn't as obvious to some of the folks on the retention side that we could use channels like LinkedIn advertising or PPC, you know, and other channels that just seemed like a cost that you wouldn't apply to the post-sale experience, but that we can and should kind of be reminding folks within organizations that you're a customer, that you've got access to a ton of great data and analytics that you could be using to sell to healthcare. And, you know, even some messaging in channels like that say, you know, you can use this thing, you have it, and here's how your peers and competitors are kind of using it now. So I think the management and introduction of other channels combined with the messaging is really the kind of, I almost said where the magic happens, and I'm really, really sorry I even thought it, but just the, you know, where things really come together for us. So there's a lot of, again, just it's almost the insights to action piece where we say, hey, we learned in this analysis that a frequent source of churn is this. Okay. If folks are kind of doubting, you know, the value of a product in very certain and particular ways, and there's trends there, we obviously need to build some messaging that addresses that, that really reinforces that value. Maybe even go back to the drawing board to say, is it as valuable as we think it is if this is the client feedback, right? Really deep kind of analysis there. But if we determine that it is, then not only building that messaging, but also disseminating it in the right channels, I think is where we step in.
Okay. And by the way, because we had this poll earlier, so very few people actually raised their hand that they have the collaboration that you two have. So I think it's a blessing, and it's amazing to see how that works. I think with that, if we don't have any additional questions, actually we'll end the session on time. So first of all, thank you very much, both Allison and Allastair. It was great having you. I think it was very informative and amazing to see how you guys collaborate and you actually impact revenue, impact customer satisfaction, impact advocacy. That's great to see. So I mean, if any last words, happy to hear those. With that, we'll kind of say our goodbyes for today.
I would say even from the beginning. Oh, Allastair, please go ahead.
No, go ahead, Allison.
Just that it's really interesting to hear that folks aren't having these meetings, and I think we kind of started out by saying, hey, you know, sales marketing alignment has been something we've been beat over the head about, but you know, marketing and CX alignment, I think, is again, I'd close by saying I think this is the next frontier, the absolute imperative relationship that you need to be building if you're in marketing.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree.
Great. Thank you again
Thank
for
you.
your time sharing this data.
Thank
Thank
you.
you everybody for joining us. It was great having you, and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.